Welcome! Each week I search the news for interesting items about the weather and climate, and this video is a summary of the results of that research for the week ending the 16th of January 2020. I hope you will enjoy. The big climate news this week is that NOAA released its January of 2020 Global Climate Report, and this map shows where the record high and the record low places are around the globe. Record lows are indicated by dark blue, and you'll see there are no dark blue pixels on this whole map. Record warm is indicated by a dark red, and there are nearly 100 of those pixels spread across the globe. This is why this January is the warmest on record. What is particularly remarkable about this is that January of 2020 was the warmest on record, despite it being a El Niño-La Niña neutral period. The previous record was in 2016, when we had a very strong El Niño, which is a warming of the Eastern Pacific. So we've set a new record, despite a large proportion of the planet being not as hot as it was back in 2016. For the continental United States, the picture was quite similar. It was the fourth warmest January on record, with most of the eastern half of the country being well above normal and the rest of the country basically being warmer than normal but not necessarily setting any records. Extraordinarily strong winds have been recorded in California. Wind speeds of about 150 miles an hour were measured in the mountains near Lake Tahoe. One gust apparently exceeded 209 miles per hour, which would be some sort of record, but that record is not confirmed as yet. But nonetheless, it's indicating we're getting very strong storms, or much stronger than normal storms, coming through the west coast. An exceptionally strong winter storm struck Great Britain this week. It was called Storm CIARA. It hit not only Britain, but Belgium, France, Germany and Poland. It had winds of over 90 miles an hour, and there was widespread flooding, power outages, cancelled flights, and train services were disrupted by fallen trees. 5 deaths have been recorded so far. Europe has decided to scrap daylight savings time. The last clock change in Europe will occur in March of 2021. Member states do have the option of staying permanently on summer or winter time, but they must remain that way once they've made their decision. Summer's daylight savings time was introduced over 100 years ago to save energy during World War I. It's largely obsolete now because of flexible working hours and technology has made it so. We did actually try this in the 1960s in the UK to stay on permanently on summertime, but the number of traffic deaths for school children going to school during the winter alarmingly increased, and so they scrapped it. There has been major flooding in the southeastern United States. Heavy rains have caused the floods, and there was so much rain that one dam was in danger of collapsing. So residents had to be evacuated from their homes that were threatened because they were downstream of the dam. The problem is that there's more rain on the way. There is also major flooding in Brazil. Severe flooding in the São Paulo area has caused mudslides. 250 people had to be evacuated because of the floods, and 1 person is dead and 2 are still missing. There's been major flooding in New Zealand, presumably from the same storms that hit southeastern Australia. The South Island was inundated with nearly a metre of rain, that's 39 inches over a period of a few days. Tourists were trapped by floods and mudslides, and over 6,000 people had to be evacuated. There have been some reports going around that the Arctic sea ice is recovering its area, and to some extent that is true. It's back to where it was about 20 years ago. Why is this? Well, you may have noticed we've had a very mild winter, and the result of that is the fact that the polar vortex has remained in place and has not been weakened this year. So all the cold air has been bottled up in the Arctic, and that freezes the surface of the Arctic Ocean. So that's why the sea ice has increased in area. Now the news is not all good, because the sea ice volume is still near record lows. That means the ice we're seeing is merely 1 year ice, i.e. it'll melt during the summer, and we will be back to square one again. Let's take a look at the status of the coronavirus. The disease continues to spread. Now there are 29 countries affected, but 98% of the cases are still in China. Over 70,000 cases overall, with 1,671 deaths. This is a map showing the distribution of those cases. And you can see China is by far having the biggest problem, but also Vietnam, Malaysia, Japan and South Korea are all also having problems. The thing about these viruses is that they often come in waves. This wave may be declining, but there's always a chance of a second wave later in the year. So we must be vigilant. Just a few weeks ago, we were worrying about bushfires in Australia. Now Australia's been hit by a whole series of storms in the southeast. But another storm, a tropical cyclone, DAMIAN, has hit northwestern Australia. It's a Category 1 storm with peak winds of about 90 miles an hour, where thousands have lost power, but there are no reported fatalities, thank goodness. People are saying in the UK, okay, where is the snow? Most of the areas in the UK that get at least 2 to 3 days of snow every winter. This is becoming less and less frequent. Some parts have not seen any snow for the whole of the winter period so far. The long-term trend is for lower and lower snowfalls, even in Scotland. Spring flowers are already coming out in some places. To give you some idea how much things have changed, there are two maps issued by the UK Metro. To give you some idea how much things have changed over the last few decades, here are two maps taken 20 years apart. The one on the left is the average number of snow days from 1961 to 1990. On the right is the same quantity, but from 1981 to 2010, just 20 years further on. And notice how much lighter the whole map is on the right compared with the map on the left. And this shows that there's been a significant reduction in snow days throughout the whole country, even up in Scotland. I used to live right in the centre opposite the Isle of Wight there, and we used to expect getting 3, 4, 5 days of snow per year. But now we're in the less than 5 bracket, and I suspect it's going to be less than that for the coming years. So when at the end of next year the UK Met Office issues the same map for 1991 to 2020, I am assuming it's going to be a lot lighter again. You may remember last week that Antarctica recorded a brand new high temperature record of about 19 degrees centigrade. That was just shattered this week by a second temperature of above 20. It was reached on Seymour Island at 20.75 degrees centigrade. Another problem for Antarctica. A huge iceberg has broken away from the Pine Island Glacier. Some of the pieces are the size of major cities or small countries. It's only 500 meters thick, so it's a long, thin plain and is liable to be broken up very quickly as it moves out into the rough open waters of the southern Atlantic. The problem with such massive losses of ice shelves is that these are the things that hold back the glaciers from flowing from the inland part of Antarctica. So consequently, when one of these gives way, the glacier moves faster and sends more ice into the ocean, which will eventually increase sea levels significantly. You may recall that just a few slides back I was talking about the major storm that hit the UK called CIARA. Well, a second, even more intense storm is hitting the UK now. It's called Dennis, and it's one of the strongest storms ever to be recorded in the Atlantic. 2 people have died when they were washed overboard from a freighter. Winds of up to 77 miles per hour caused downed trees. extensive flooding across the country, and there have been power outages in many places. The government has called out the army to help assist with flood control. More flooding, this time in Mississippi. There's a major flooding event going on there now. The Pearl River is over 8 feet above flood stage at the moment and is predicted to rise another 3 feet. Mississippi has had over 20 inches of rain in the Jacksonville area year to date, and the governor of Mississippi has now declared a state of emergency there. It is likely that all of us out in the coming year are going to experience some sort of extreme weather, and that weather is going to get more common and more extreme as time goes by. So I can only say, stay safe, and until next time, goodbye.